Welcome to the Rich Report, a podcast with news and information on the world of cloud computing. Today, my guest is from Acronis. We have Scott Crenshaw. He's the Senior VP of Strategy at the company. So, Scott, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much, Rich. Glad to be here. I really appreciate your time and time of your listeners. You know, we're at a crossroads in IT because in IT today, the world is scary and frankly, it's getting kind of expensive. Because look what's happening. Every user in a corporation, large or small, has got multiple devices that they're expecting to access all of their files, all their applications, all their information. On average, analysts tell us the average user has over 3 devices: a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, maybe a desktop. And these users today are different than what we were like 20 years ago, where IT could tell us what to do, because now the users feel in control and they expect to be able to do all of their work, access all of their data all of the time. That means 7 by 24 from any device everywhere they are. And what's more, they're generating more data than ever before, and they expect to be able to access it, not just now, not just tomorrow, but forever. I mean, the bottom line here is that the demand for data and data access is just unlimited. But the truth is that budgets aren't. So we're headed for what we call a data fiscal cliff, because the current model of how data is stored and accessed is simply unaffordable, and it's unsustainable. And it also doesn't fulfill the needs that users expect today. And that's why cloud storage will become a crucial part of IT strategy for companies large and small this year. You know, in the last few years, we've all worked hard to develop, a great set of tools and technologies and habits and practices to make computing clouds practical, right? So people can use cloud computing to move virtual machines around, to allow server compute nodes to be shared, to be elastic. And this has enabled new business models. It's allowed companies to get new competitive advantage. It's built new, and more attractive cost structures, and created possibilities for companies that just never could have been practical before. And I believe that in 2013, this is the year we'll begin doing the same thing with storage clouds. Rich, could we go to the next slide, please? So without adopting new storage architectures, without changing the way we handle and pay for storage, IT is simply going to fail because it's going to be unable to meet the demands of the users. You know, compute clouds gained their cost advantage really in 2 ways. One is that they were able to manage resources more efficiently. But the second one is they were able to balance the different demand characteristics of different workloads. So you could match one workload with another, one, that like a retail environment, very transactional, one a batch environment, something that was, had a lot of load on weekends with something that had a lot of load during the weekdays. And they were able to do this kind of statistical load balancing. Because very few applications used all of the CPU all of the time. And those that did, you wouldn't even run on a cloud anyway. But storage economics are very different because you don't get advantage by doing the statistical balancing. You get advantage by using fundamental new technologies which enable reliable, scalable storage using really cheap hardware, commodity servers and consumer disks. And the secret sauce, the way to make this more affordable, the way to change the economics of storage in a fundamental way, is by making these commodity hardware components work together in a reliable fashion. And there are a few, but a very few technologies which can demonstrably do this. In fact, last year, the backup cloud that Acronis runs for its customers received a shipment of disks, and 300 of those disks turned out to be faulty. They all failed essentially simultaneously, and not a single byte of data was lost for our users. There was no disruption at all in the service. Right, and that's because we're using a technology which is just fundamentally groundbreaking that can help solve this upcoming storage crisis. If we could go to the next slide. The problem really stems from the end users. The end users have a set of expectations that are just, in the previous world of 5, 10, or 20 years ago, would have been unthinkable, right? Because the users want to get all of their data on every device they've got, whenever they need it, 7 by 24 of course. I wake up at 3 in the morning, I expect to get access to everything I have. And it should never go down. Every application has to be highly available. But I want it cheaply or free. I'm not willing to pay extra for all this capability. And that seems to be an irreconcilable set of requirements. But the fact is that users are getting a lot of this capability themselves, bypassing the IT department and using cheap or free public cloud services. And these are usually very insecure, unmanaged, unaudited. In many cases, the company who they work for, the data that they're storing on these services, even the company doesn't even know that the users have put the data there. So IT has to respond, and it has to respond to these two conflicting challenges. One is they have to supply the users the services they need, or else IT becomes irrelevant. And yet at the same time, IT has to consider the things it's paid to look after, like security, like data protection, like policy, like auditability. And for most use cases, the solution to this is to create a hybrid cloud architecture. And by hybrid, I mean one that mixes owned resources, things you have on-premise in your own data centers, and rented resources, such as you get from a cloud provider. And you use that mix of resources to get the right balance between cost, availability, security, and so forth. But it's managed by the IT department. And if you do it right, you get the best of both worlds. The end user gets what they need, and IT provides the security, the protection, the management, the policies, and so forth that they need to do to behave responsibly. This is really the key to IT being able to meet these seemingly impossible demands from end users. If we go to the next slide and look out a little bit into our crystal ball, we see a number of new technologies emerging which let the end users do more even than they can do now, and also let IT provide more value to the end users and also to their employers. And these are things, capabilities like secure endpoint access and synchronization, which lets users access everything they need to from their iOS device or Android device, laptop, desktop, Mac, tablet, smartphone. And when the users make a mistake, when they delete data accidentally or intentionally, but they discover they need it later, they can get exactly the data that they need. They can recover it, not just in the use case where a data center goes down or a server goes down and they need a disaster recovery solution, but when the end user actually deletes the file and needs to get it back. That granular recovery of data is something end users expect and they can't quite get today. We also see new technologies emerging for true portability, allowing any-to-any migration of data and applications from different devices, from different servers, from different virtualization providers, from different clouds, and from different types of storage. And this is really important because we've seen a trend where the vendors continually try to lock in customers to a single monolithic architecture to try to prevent customers from having choice and getting both the access to technology, innovation, but also the economic control that the end users demand. The only way you can control your economics is if you control your architecture. The only way to control your architecture is if you have choices that you can make between vendors. And so providing any-to-any migration, allowing for true homogeneous infrastructure is absolutely key as companies start to build out their IT strategies for the future. And finally, we see technologies emerging, as we discussed a moment ago, for very reliable storage of massive quantities of data, petabyte scale, using low-cost consumer-grade disks and servers. So if we go to the next slide, and as we look forward, we really see this evolving to a new concept of what a file system is. Because when you look out into the future, you can see that for a vast majority of users and for most of the new applications that they spend their time using, the concept of what a file system is changing, right? Because today users expect to be able to access the same set of data from any device at any time, anywhere. And so it's the file synchronization repository that enables that, and that is the place where all the devices go to find their data. This is increasingly becoming the file system of choice when viewed from the perspective of the end user. And when you start to think of the file system in this way, you start to realize that as every device can access all a user's data, they have more opportunities to create and share and improve their work with help from their friends and from their associates inside their company and outside their company. And that these devices, they end up storing both personal and business data, and increasingly that data is going to be segregated and protected from each other automatically, so that when a user leaves the company can wipe its data off their device, but the user's personal data remains. These devices will increasingly be able to access not just new applications, but the data from legacy applications. And the user can be confident that the data is always current and coherent between devices. It'll be secure, and it'll be always available. If a hurricane comes through a wide section of the country and takes out data centers, the end user devices simply need to point to an alternate data center in another private cloud or in a shared public cloud that's where the repository for this file system has been synchronized. So the users never notice the interruption. They get the 7x24 always available support at a fraction of the cost, at 100th or 1,000th of the cost of traditional disaster recovery mechanisms. And this means that the users can access their data always, no matter what. So we believe very strongly that this is the direction that organizations large and small all around the world are going to be moving to. It's towards a new concept of the file system. And in order for this to happen, the first step is the beginning of the adoption of cloud-based storage. That's why we think this cloud-based storage is going to become a critical part of IT strategies in 2013. So, Rich, that's the end of the formal part of the slides. I'd love to answer any questions you have.
Well, Scott, you've done a great job of describing the issues and the problem, and I'm curious about what the magic box is that's going to solve all this. Right?
Well, it's a very good question, Rich. And like most things, it's not a monolithic solution. In fact, it shouldn't be. I think companies should be very suspicious of vendors promising monolithic solutions, because the one thing you can be guaranteed about a monolithic solution is that you'll be locked into it and not have choice. And the second thing you can be guaranteed is that it won't deliver everything the vendor promises, right? We all know this. So instead, I think that what we're seeing now is the adoption of a number of different technologies that allow this. So, for example, from Acronis, looking at Acronis as a vendor, we've been very deliberate in our development of certain technologies that make this future possible. One of them is our Mobile Echo and Active Echo secure file synchronization and sharing technology, which allows Android and iOS devices, Mac OS, and Windows devices to share files securely and with policy and audit capabilities that are established and managed by the IT department. So the rules are set by IT, and then users can do whatever they want within those rules. And it runs inside the data center or in a hybrid cloud, which is exactly how we get the secure endpoint access as needed. On the other end of the spectrum, we have developed a very high-scale, petabyte-scale file system that we've been running for 2 years in production as the backbone of our backup cloud, our cloud backup service. And this is a very resilient file system that uses very inexpensive disks and hardware that provides very reliable, very scalable disk-based storage at a cost approaching that of offline tape storage, right? So this is a game changer. And when you combine those two technologies, you get, a very interesting and unique and important solution to both ends of the spectrum, the devices that need to access and create the data, and a way to cost effectively and reliably store it at petabyte scale. And then when you add into the middle of that all of the traditional capability we have around very fast, very reliable backup and recovery, you suddenly see the pieces start to come together in a very, very unique way. So again, we're not suggesting a monolithic solution that we claim will solve everything. I think there are companies who've gone down that road with vendors in the past and discovered that they're writing checks of tens of millions of dollars and not really gotten the value that the functionality they were promised. With Acronis, we're taking a very different approach. We're developing technologies that work well together, that fit well together, that can be combined easily into solutions, but that don't attempt to lock the user in and take away the choice that's so important today and to have an agile, flexible architecture.
So then, Scott, your customer then is the solution providers, right? The people that might offer this service to the consumer.
Yeah, Rich, that's a really interesting point. So, I think the line is getting blurred now between end user customers like small and medium businesses or enterprises who buy technology to run in their data center and service providers who want to provide cloud-based or other services to those same set of end user customers. We're getting high demand for all of this technology from both sets of the population. And the reason is simple. End users today expect to be able to have a choice to use a technology that's hosted by a third party or that's run inside their data center. They expect to be able to do both with both usage models with any technology. So we're getting strong demand both from the end user community and service provider community.
Sure. And then as you deploy this out there, I mean, is there a way for people to kick the tires and see if it's right for their application?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two of the critical components that I mentioned are being used in production by customers large and small around the world today. So if anyone wants to come to acronis.com, well, you can see it on the slides here, acronis.com. They can get access to the file synchronization repository technology, Mobile Echo, Active Echo. They can also get access to our cloud backup and traditional online backup, on-site backup tools as well. So they can download those and start using them and try them out and see how well they work for them, and they can do it today. Now the scale-out storage technology I was describing is something that is running in the back end of our cloud service, and so the users get advantage of it, but the technology itself is hidden from the users right now. We'll be turning that into products that end users can buy later this year. So that'll be an important event later in 2013.
Well, that's very exciting. So Scott Crenshaw, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today.
It's been a real pleasure, Rich. Thank you so much.
You bet. Okay, folks, that's it for the Rich Report. Stay tuned for more news and information on the world of cloud computing.